This is my ranking of the best PS5 exclusive games I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each title is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how polished, immersive, and memorable the overall experience felt. Let's get straight into the list. Astro Bot starts off like a simple platformer, but very quickly it becomes something far more creative and playful than I expected. Every level introduces a new idea, whether it's a fresh ability, a clever environmental twist, or a small surprise that keeps things feeling new. I liked how it mixes original gameplay with PlayStation history, where familiar characters show up in fun ways without slowing the pace. The DualSense features also stand out, with the controller reacting to movements, weather, and actions in a way that makes everything feel more alive. Even though most levels are linear, there are enough secrets and hidden paths that kept me exploring instead of rushing ahead. It keeps changing things just at the right time, so it never feels repetitive or dull. This one clearly belongs in the masterpiece tier. Destruction AllStars tries to deliver chaotic car combat, and at first it does feel fun smashing into other vehicles at high speed and racking up points. The driving itself is smooth and easy to pick up, and those quick moments of crashing into opponents can be satisfying for a while. But after some time, it starts to feel very repetitive, with not much depth to keep things interesting. What really breaks the flow is when I'm forced out of the car, running around on foot while everything exciting is happening elsewhere, which just feels slow and pointless. The different modes also don't add much variety, and some of them actually make the experience worse instead of better. There are a few fun moments here and there, but they don't last long enough to carry the game. This ends up sitting in the trash tier. Silent Hill: The Short Message brings back that classic horror style, but it ends up feeling a bit empty and forgettable. The idea of a looping nightmare and psychological story sounds interesting at first, but the way it plays out feels too predictable and lacks depth. I noticed it leans heavily on familiar horror ideas without adding anything new, so after a while it becomes repetitive instead of scary. The environments also don't change much, with similar hallways and moments that start blending together. There are a few good elements like the music and creature design, but they aren't enough to carry the whole experience. Even the chase sequences become frustrating because they rely more on trial and error than real tension. This ends up landing in the mediocre tier. Synapse puts me inside this strange mind world where everything looks sharp and different, with black, white, and gray environments that instantly stand out. What really makes it fun is the mix of shooting and telekinesis, where I can grab enemies, throw objects, and create chaos in ways that feel very satisfying in VR. I liked experimenting with different ways to fight, especially when combining powers and weapons during each run. The roguelite structure also keeps things fresh, giving me upgrades and new abilities that slowly make me stronger over time. There are moments where the shooting doesn't feel as accurate as I want, which can be a bit frustrating, but it doesn't ruin the experience. It's short, but the gameplay loop makes it worth coming back to. This earns its place in the great tier. Code Violet is a third-person sci-fi game with dinosaurs, and at first that idea sounded really exciting to me. But once I got into it, the gameplay started to feel a bit outdated, especially with the shooting and enemy behavior. The combat doesn't feel very smooth, and most enemies act in simple, predictable ways, so fights don't stay interesting for long. I also noticed the level design gets repetitive, with similar hallways and areas that don't give much reason to explore. The story didn't connect much either, as the characters feel flat, and the moments don't leave a strong impact. There are a few nice visuals here and there, especially outside, but they don't make up for everything else. This ends up sitting in the good tier. God of War: Sons of Sparta shows a different side of Kratos, focusing more on his early life and his bond with his brother, which I actually found interesting to see. The story has some good moments, especially in the character interactions, but the gameplay doesn't always match that same level. Combat gives me a lot of options, but many of them don't feel necessary, so I ended up sticking to a few simple moves most of the time. The exploration and level design feel a bit basic, with long stretches that don't offer much variety or excitement. There are some nice-looking areas and ideas, but they don't stand out as much as I hoped. It's still a solid experience with enough to keep me going, even if it doesn't reach the series' best moments. This one finds its spot in the excellent tier. Saros takes place in a strange alien world where everything keeps changing, and that constant shift makes every run feel different. The combat is fast and intense, with a mix of shooting and movement that pushes me to stay aggressive instead of hiding. I really like how the risk and reward system works, especially with abilities like the shield that lets me absorb attacks and send them back. It feels satisfying when everything clicks together during a fight. The roguelike structure also helps, with shorter runs and upgrades that make progress feel steady instead of frustrating. There's also a stronger focus on story this time, which adds more meaning to what I'm doing between all the action. It doesn't feel completely fresh, but it builds really well on its ideas. This secures its place in the great tier. Demon Souls feels like a true test of patience and skill, where every fight makes me think before I act. The combat is slow and careful, so every move matters, and even small mistakes can cost everything. I really like how each area feels different, with its own challenges that force me to change how I play instead of just repeating the same strategy. The boss fights are also very memorable, with some creative ideas that stay in my mind long after finishing them. On top of that, the remake looks incredible, with detailed environments and smooth performance that make the whole world feel alive. It can be tough and sometimes frustrating, but the feeling of overcoming those challenges makes it worth it every time. This easily stands tall in the masterpiece tier. R-Type Final 3 Evolved brings back that classic side-scrolling shooter gameplay, and I enjoyed the core combat more than anything else. Blasting through enemies with different ships and using the force system still feels satisfying, and there's a lot of variety with unlocks and customization that kept me experimenting. The levels look good too, with some nice environments and effects, even if they don't always stand out. But movement feels a bit off at times, and that can make tight situations more frustrating than they should be. The pacing also feels slow in places, which takes away from the intensity the genre usually delivers. There's a decent amount of content here, but it doesn't hit the same level as the older games. This finds its place in the good tier. Horizon Call of the Mountain gives me a close-up look at the Horizon world in VR, and the sense of scale really stands out, especially when huge machines move right in front of me. The visuals and small details make everything look impressive, and the combat with the bow feels satisfying when I hit weak points and dodge attacks. I also like how interactive things are, like crafting arrows and physically aiming shots. But a big part of the game is climbing, and after a while that starts to feel repetitive and slows things down. The story is fine, but mostly there to support the big moments instead of doing something deep. When the action picks up, it becomes much more engaging and fun to play. It's not perfect, but it delivers a solid VR experience. This lands in the great tier. Quantum Error has a strong sci-fi horror setting, and at first the atmosphere caught my attention with its dark environments and unsettling tone. Some of the firefighting mechanics are also interesting, like putting out fires and managing hazards, which feels different from typical horror gameplay. But once I got deeper into it, the combat started to feel weak, with enemies that act in very simple ways and don't really challenge me. The shooting itself isn't very satisfying, and the controls can feel clunky at times. The checkpoint system also becomes frustrating, especially when I lose progress and have to repeat long sections again. There are good ideas here, but they don't come together in a strong way. This ends up falling into the mediocre tier. Ghost of Yōtei builds on what came before and focuses more on refining the experience instead of changing everything. The combat stands out the most, with smooth swordplay and multiple weapons that make every fight feel dynamic and satisfying. I like switching between different tools depending on the enemy, and the flow of parries, dodges, and attacks keeps battles engaging. The world also looks beautiful, with detailed environments that make exploring enjoyable. The story is more personal this time, with a stronger main character and a revenge-driven journey that has some good moments, even if it can feel predictable at times. Stealth is still there, but the real highlight is going head-on into fights. It doesn't do anything completely new, but it does a lot of things really well. This belongs in the excellent tier. Astro's Playroom looks like a small pack-in game at first, but it quickly turns into something way more fun and creative than I expected. Every level introduces new ideas, especially with how the DualSense controller is used, where I can actually feel different surfaces, movements, and actions in my hands. The platforming itself is simple but very polished, and the constant mix of mechanics keeps things fresh the whole time. I also really liked all the PlayStation references hidden throughout the game, which made exploring more rewarding and added a lot of charm. It doesn't try to be long or complex, but everything it does feels well-designed and memorable from start to finish. This easily earns a spot in the masterpiece tier. Neptunia ReVerse is a colorful JRPG that mixes humor, gaming references, and a light story that doesn't take itself too seriously. I like the characters and the way the dialogue keeps things fun, even if it repeats some jokes a bit too often. The turn-based combat has some depth with different attack types and combo setups, which kept me engaged when I started experimenting with it. There's also a lot of content with side missions, crafting, and customization, but many areas and battles start to feel repetitive after a while. Visually, it looks cleaner than older versions, but it still feels like a game from an earlier generation. It has its ups and downs, but there's enough here to enjoy. This one lands in the good tier. Death Stranding 2 On the Beach builds on the first game and adds a lot more options to how I approach everything. Delivering cargo is still the main focus, but now I have better tools, vehicles, and faster progression, which makes the experience smoother and less slow at the start. I really like how combat and stealth are expanded, giving me more freedom to either avoid danger or deal with it directly. The world also looks incredible, with detailed environments and strong atmosphere that makes every journey stand out. What stood out most to me is the story and characters, which feel more emotional and better developed this time. It doesn't change the core idea too much, but it improves it in meaningful ways. This clearly fits into the excellent tier. The Dark Pictures Switchback VR is more focused on fast-paced shooting than story, and I had fun blasting through enemies as the ride keeps moving forward. The on-rails setup keeps things simple, but being able to look around in VR and react to threats from different directions makes it more engaging. Shooting feels smooth and accurate, and switching weapons adds a bit of variety during each run. I also liked some of the creative VR ideas, especially moments that use eye tracking in a creepy way. But the experience is pretty short, and the story doesn't really add much, which makes it feel a bit shallow. The jump scares also get repetitive after a while instead of staying tense. It's a fun ride, but not something that stays with me for long. This settles into the good tier. That wraps up my personal ranking of PS5 exclusives based on how each game felt from start to finish. Some truly stood out, while others just didn't leave the same impact, but each one offered something different along the way. Thanks for watching.